right, Marissa, you ready for me to start? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's time to get started. Welcome to CPS HR Consulting's Women Leadership Panel. I'm glad you're here. I'm Allison Horak. I'm a project consultant for CPS HR. I'm the moderator of the panel, which means I'll be posing questions to our panel members and trying to keep us on schedule. We also have CPS HR's Training and Development Manager, Karen Evans, here with us. She'll be monitoring the Q&A, taking note of your questions for the panelists, which I'll talk about more in just a moment. So I'd like to take just a moment to introduce our topic. So to kick off our discussion, I thought I'd start with a few relevant statistics. As you might expect, there's good news and bad news about women in the workplace, especially in leadership positions. The Pew Research Center tells us that the share of women sitting on the boards of Fortune 500 companies has been gradually increasing for decades. Women represented just 10% of board positions in 1995, and that number has risen to 30% in 2022. Research done by the Academy of Women Leadership, however, reveals that as of 2023, women account for around 40% of the workforce worldwide, while only 30% of senior leadership positions are held by women. And we've got a similar good news, bad news situation from research done by McKinsey. McKinsey is a global management consulting firm that provides advisory services to corporations, governments, other organizations. And this year marks the 10th anniversary of McKinsey's Women in the Workplace report, which is the largest study done on women in corporate America. So McKinsey reports that we've seen meaningful, though modest, gains in women's corporate representation. However, women remain underrepresented at every stage of the corporate pipeline. What's more, women continue to face barriers at the beginning of the pipeline. In other words, they remain less likely than men to be hired into entry-level roles, which then leaves them underrepresented from the start. So then women are far less likely than men to attain their very first promotion to a management role. And that situation does not really seem to be improving. So where does that leave us? Well, we can celebrate the strides women have made so far, and we can all keep championing women in the workplace, which is in part what we're doing here today. So let me introduce our panelists. I'm going to go in alphabetical order by first name. First, I'd like to welcome Darcy Totten to the panel. Darcy serves as the Executive Director at the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. She has over 20 years of experience in crisis communication, journalism, public policy, and external affairs. Darcy has built a nationally recognized effort while at the Commission. She authored the Commission's award-winning original research report, the California Women's Economic Blueprint for Pandemic Recovery, and the award-winning #WomenAreEssential campaign, highlighting the role of women as essential workers in California's economy. Darcy's an expert in social impact strategies, issue advocacy, crisis communications, and gender-focused public policy. She's passionate about coalition building and working with intersectional and inclusive teams that prioritize historically marginalized communities. Darcy holds a bachelor's degree from Mills College in studio art and visual communication, and a master's degree in journalism from University of Texas at Austin. She lives in Sacramento with her wife Jasper and, her words, 2 mini cats. Welcome, Darcy. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Christy McKinney. And congratulations are in order because earlier this month, Christy was named Executive Director at the Port of Oakland in California. Her appointment by the Oakland Board of Port Commissioners represents a natural transition from her previous role as Chief Operating Officer, which she held since 2020. During her tenure as COO, Christy oversaw port operations, including engineering services, environmental programs and planning, utilities, and IT. Prior to serving in that role, Christy, was the Assistant Director of Aviation at the Port's Oakland Airport since 2014. Christy graduated from San Jose University with a Bachelor of Science degree in aeronautics. She then went on to receive her master's in civil engineering from the University of California at Berkeley. Welcome, Christy. Our third panelist is LaShawn Ross. Welcome, LaShawn. Over her 35-year career, LaShawn has worked as an HR director, deputy city manager, and HR consultant. After retiring from municipal government in 2016, LaShawn worked independently as a professional development facilitator and served in interim HR roles with 3 municipalities. She then returned to the city of Plano, Texas, as Director of HR and Risk Management in 2022. Then, in 2023, she moved back into the Deputy City Manager role. LaShawn is committed to supporting personal and professional growth and maintains community engagement through board appointments, mentorships, and other volunteer opportunities. LaShawn particularly enjoys her roles as mother, mother-in-law, and grandmother. Welcome, LaShawn. Our final panelist is Laura Nomura. Laura has over 35 years experience in the public and private sectors. She's passionate about mentoring and training local government professionals. Laura recently retired from serving as the Deputy General Manager of the Eastern Municipal Water District. There, she oversaw all administrative functions, including finance, HR, IT, and customer service. Before working for the Water District, Laura served as the Assistant General Manager for Finance and Administration for Riverside Public Utilities in California. She has also served as the Finance Director for the California cities of Hemet and Irwindale, and Controller for the City of Riverside. Laura is a CPA, holds a BA in accounting from California State University Fullerton, and a master's in organizational leadership from the University of Redlands. Laura serves on the board for the Association of Women in Water, Energy, and Environment. She volunteers as a mentor for that organization and also volunteers for the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers Association, where she received their Distinguished Service Award. Welcome, Laura. So those are our 4 panelists. We're really excited to have all of you here. So it's exciting to have these 4 women leaders join us today, and I foresee that you'll have questions for them as we hear from them. I encourage you to pose questions to them through the Q&A feature in Zoom. As I mentioned, Karen Evans will be monitoring the Q&A. So around 11 a.m., we'll transition from my questions for the panel to your questions for the panel, and we'll have about 20 minutes for your questions. Please put the name of the panel member you're directing your question to at the beginning of your question. If your question isn't for any one or more of the panelists in particular, just put the word anyone at the beginning of your question so we know who to direct it toward. Thank you. All right, let's do this. Let's get into it. So what I will do is I have a series of questions. I will say the name or names of the panelists to whom I'm directing the questions, and then panelists, please unmute to answer. So the first question is for Laura and Christy. So I'll ask you to go in that order, Laura first and then Christy. Here's the question. I'd like to start by asking each of you this. What inspired you to pursue a career in the public sector? Laura, why don't you kick us off?
Good morning, everybody. Well, I'll just say that when I was a accounting major in at Cal State Fullerton, there really wasn't much discussion about public sector opportunities. In the accounting function, you were geared towards public accounting or maybe working for a Fortune 500 company. So the way that I fell kind of into public sector was through public accounting. I audited a lot of public sector. And that really gave me a lot of opportunity to kind of see how government works and meeting the people in the public sector. And I think that's probably what really engaged me, just seeing the professionalism. I mean, you don't hear about public sector and a lot of times in a positive note, but working with side by side with people in the public sector really piqued my interest. And so when the hours got tough in public accounting, I wanted to be a mom, I wanted to do, have a little bit more of a life. I opted to go work for one of my clients, which was the city of Riverside. And you know what? I never looked back. I mean, it just gave a career in public sector just gave me everything I needed. I mean, it was amazing. I did go in at a manager level, so that I had brought a lot of my career experience in public accounting, of just problem solving and communication and those kind of things. So I was able to kind of enter in at a little bit higher level. And really, it's just people are so supportive. It's a very, public sector is more complex than people give it credit for. Like you think that we just go in and stamp, routine tasks, but it's a complex organization. So I really was engaged by it. I just and then bringing the people along that just wanted to learn. I can't say enough about the public sector and my career. It gave me everything, and that's why for now I really want to give back to just people interested in seeking something in the public sector.
Thank you, Laura. Christy, you're up next.
Thank you. Yeah, well, really, I actually started in the private sector and I was in management consulting for airports throughout the country. I had a mentor in college who had worked for airports themselves, which in the United States are predominantly public sector run and led. And so I was familiar with that as I moved into the airport world. And I was working with all public sector clients because they were my clients. But I really loved consulting. It was a great education and starting point. But at some point, when I started settling into my community here in Oakland, I was becoming more community minded, doing things in my neighborhood. And the opportunity presented itself to come work at the Port of Oakland, which runs the Oakland Airport. I thought, well, let's give that a try. And I'll be honest with you, the first few years, I would probably have told you there's no way I'm going to last in the public sector. There are a lot of differences in how the public sector operates, and how you have to function. And it was at first, given the contrast with the private sector, I was kind of like, gee, this seems inefficient, or this doesn't seem to make sense. And over time, you realize sort of when you're a public servant, why certain things have to be done a certain way. You also can find ways to make the public sector more efficient, and drive innovation and drive change, which is, and there's real opportunity for that, which is something I've had the great opportunity to do here at the port. And the port itself, absolutely public sector, we're public servants, but we actually don't receive tax revenues. So we're, a little bit more like a public utility. You're generating the revenues that you have to operate out of. So it's a little bit different than, let's say, if you're at a city or county. So I really liked that balance. It really, it and remains extremely fulfilling to be able to really contribute to the community. We don't just focus on the bottom line. We have a tremendous amount of programs that really help our community, help fund different programs. We're sort of all inclusive when we look at how we do a project and how does it benefit everybody, not just the bottom line or our revenues. And that's extremely appealing in terms of giving back to the community and making sure your whole community is lifted up by these business activities and not just, corporate profits.
All right. Thank you so much, Christy and Laura. All right, we're going to switch gears, and this question's for LaShawn. What's one policy or initiative you've championed that you believe will have a lasting impact on your community?
It has been succession planning and leadership development. In my time with the city of Plano, one of the first things that happened when I came here in 2001 was there was all this discussion about the graying of City Hall and, where all these people going to leave before long, and we're going to be 2.3 million short on the workers that we need. So our city manager at that time came to me and said, LaShawn, we got to do something about this succession planning and all of this. And at the time, I had no idea what that even was. It's like, look, I just got here. I don't know what I'm being asked to do. So I had an opportunity to really do a lot of research and study for about 9 months on not just about how do we make sure that as people leave our organization, that there are not performance gaps that remain? How do we make sure that regardless of who's here, regardless of who's leaving and who's coming, how are we making sure that we are prepared to do the work at the level that our citizens expect in Plano? And so because of that, I was able to put together a program. It's called the Management Preparation Program of Plano. We call it MP3. We put it in place in 2002, and it has remained in place. And I think that while I was gone and during the pandemic, it relaxed for obvious reasons. We relaxed a lot of things during that time, but I'm really excited because we are relaunching it actually right now. We're in the process of doing that, and so when we talk about policies that we think have also supported our community, for me, it's definitely leadership development, it's succession planning. And it's just the communicating of things that need to happen if we're always going to be at our best. And so that's been something that I've been able to work with the city of Plano on. We've seen it become part of the fabric of our culture, our organization. We've seen also how it supports our community because we are always making sure that there is never a time when we are going to be unable to provide the services that our citizens are accustomed to, because we are working on the preparation all the time on this end. And leadership development, training, personal development, all of that is really important. I know that we all know this, and probably the entire audience that we're with today knows that things are not getting easier necessarily in terms of how we work together, the issues that we have to address and deal with. So we have to always be creating opportunities for us to be able to step into whatever comes, be able to address whatever issue is brought to us. And our goal in Plano, and probably with all of us on here, is to make sure that regardless of what's happening in the environment around us, or regardless of the challenges that we feel on the inside, that is not to be something that translates to our citizens, our customers, our partners, our residents feeling like something is going in the opposite direction. We always want to be able to capitalize on the excellence that we've offered to our citizens. So that's my give for the city of Plano and our community. It's still working well, and I still stand on it, and I'm really tickled that I still get to be part of it.
All right. Thank you so much, LaShawn. I appreciate that. Okay. I am now going to transition to pose a prompt to Darcy. This is about mentorship. Please share a moment when another woman helped open a door for you in your career.
I love this question. So I don't get to tell this story very often. When I did a semester at American University in like 2000 and something. And, I had no money. I'm living in a basement full of it was one of the cicada years. So there's crickets everywhere, like deeply etched in my memory. And I really wanted to be a journalist, and news was just starting to move online. So no money, no connections. That we were eating at like art gallery openings. I think that was it. I don't know if we had a fridge. And I saw in a newspaper that Tom Kennedy was going to be on a panel at the NPPA. Now, first of all, I'm not a member. I couldn't afford the ticket. I didn't know what I was going to buy. Tripped on down there, and somehow sweet talked the security guard into letting me in the back. So I crashed the meeting. And I get there and I find the other girl in the room who's done the exact same thing, because we are both there to make this man's job. So it like as he's done speaking on his panel, she stands up. I'm like, she's gonna take my chance. I get up. We're both like, hey, over here. Do you take in turns? And he was very gracious about it. And he kind of laughed at us. And he was like, well, you want to be journalists? You got in here. That buys you the interview. So I see her the next day. We get the interview, and I was a photojournalist. So I've got like at the time we used to carry on books of our best work, right? So I've got my whole job portfolio, and he's flipping through it. And again, this is like the early days of online news. So there is a ping pong table in the conference room, and everybody's wearing, and I am way out of my depth. And I am also really, really visibly gay. This is important later, right? Like I have short hair, I'm wearing a button-down shirt and a tie. And that was not super usual. It wasn't the kind of thing that would get you a job, but I was who I was, right? And he is a little uncomfortable, right? Like he's nice, but he's flipping through my work going, okay, maybe you have a little talent. And he looks me up and down, and I could just see this man fixing his face to tell me no. And this woman walks into the room. Her name is Michelle. She is like impeccably put together, the kind of woman that makes me feel like I'm going to spill something, even if nothing's around, right? She looks expensive. And I am, the chaos agent. So I'm like, oh gosh. And she looks over, she looks at it, she looks me up and down, and she goes, Tom, hire her. And they just kind of stared at each other. And he did. And the thing about that that's important is I later learned she is also gay. And at that time, not out, not really public, that was the kind of thing that you could still really lose your job over. It was really sort of a dangerous thing she did for me, right? So she didn't just casually, haphazardly pick a woman. She did it in a way that could have cost her something. And I think that's really, really important. She took a risk that really actually was risky to her to help pull somebody else up behind her. And I can't even tell you how much that job changed the trajectory of my entire life, not just my career. I was published in the Smithsonian Magazine by the end of the summer, right? I was getting national gigs because I had the Washington Post on my resume. Probably got me my next 6 jobs. That one interaction from this one woman who was like, nobody else is going to give you a chance, so I will. So, go Michelle.
Thank you, Darcy. Appreciate that. All right. So let's transition to Laura again. And I've got a question for you, Laura, about allyship. So, in your opinion, what role do male colleagues and allies play in advancing gender equity in government? And how can we encourage more?
For me, I think it's one of the most important areas, especially in my field of working in public utilities, very male-dominated industry. There were many a time that I was the only woman in the room. I can more often than not, and help. I was fortunate that I had a lot of male colleagues and bosses that really took to women. I mean, and really listened and understood. But there are some that want to talk over you and just really not want to pay you any attention. They don't want to really hear what you have to say. So I think really taking advantage of those that are interested in learning and wanting to help women succeed is really important to engage with them and help them to see your perspective. For those that you have a little bit more of a challenge with, it's just really, I think, is really spending time and taking the time. Sometimes you're not going to get around it. It's just going to be what it's going to be, and you learn to kind of deal with those types and really but spend most of your energy on those that do want to work with women and encourage women advancement, and really just help them to understand why it's important. And luckily, as time progresses, I mean, it's taken many years, and your statistics still show it, Allison, that we really need to encourage our male colleagues and bosses to really kind of like take advantage of the differences of both genders, and see what women really have to offer. When I walked away and retired just less than a year ago, it was hard because my choices were all male, and I was going to be walking away from a executive team that had one or two women on it, and it was really hard for me. But I think, they see that, but it was hard because you're right, there weren't choices out there at the time, because I would have loved to have somebody step in from a female and give that female perspective, because we have so much to offer a leadership team that they do not see. And so helping them to understand that, gender equality is so important. And I think sometimes it's just a good old boys network out there, and it's something that you have to work around and be respectful and diligent at it. You can't be combative. You have to kind of find a way to communicate and to kind of share your perspective. And really, I think in general, the masses are supportive of it. And I really encourage us to continue to engage with our male counterparts and get them to kind of, and I think it's in you to bring that out and have the confidence to speak up and speak out.
Thank you so much, Laura. All right, LaShawn, you're up next. I've got a legacy question for you. What do you hope your leadership legacy will be?
I hope my leadership legacy will be that it's important to know ourselves, and it's important to know the environment around us, and it's important to share what we have to share. I think that my legacy goal has been the same for a very long time. And that is that I want to use the talents and the skills that I have to be able to certainly do things that make my life more fulfilling, but also to understand and always remember that there is enough stuff to go around. I don't have to hoard anything. I don't have to hold it to myself. I can share my skills, my talent, my knowledge, my time, my resources with other people, because it's not just about me going forward, it's about others. And I hope that I am able to do that in such a way that it just brings something to mind for someone many years when I'm no longer around, but my influence is still there in a positive way, that a person can stop and feel something positive about themselves because of a conversation that we had. Hopefully that I have modeled these things in a way that someone can remember what they saw me doing. I want to be a contributor. I think that that's maybe in a nutshell, that's what it is. I want to make positive contributions that are not just about today, but that last and span the time. So that beyond my children, beyond my grandchildren, but that the time that I spent here and the things that I did while I was here will matter long after I'm gone. That's what I want my legacy to be.
Thank you so much. All right. Very good. Let's move on. This is a question for two of the panelists, Christy and Darcy, and we'll go in that order. So Christy first, then Darcy. Here's a question about tough conversations. What's your strategy for handling situations where your voice is overlooked or dismissed in decision-making spaces? So Christy, you first, please.
Sure. Well, my strategy all along has really been a very high level of diligence and knowledge and expertise to ensure that what I'm bringing to the conversation is at least as valuable, if not more valuable, than others may be bringing to the discussion. And what I've discovered is that if I'm able to bring forward, and again, it depends, of course, on the context and what you're discussing, but if I'm able to bring forward a bigger perspective, more information, more diligence to the conversation, that attracts people to what you're saying, right? They're like, oh, you've done homework, you know what you're talking about. I'm hearing concrete things out of you. I'm hearing researched information out of you versus sort of out of your back pocket or ideas or feelings about things. So that suits, as you said earlier, I have engineering degrees, so that suits my style and my approach. And I found that to serve me incredibly well. And at the end of the day, if you have people who are truly trying to step over you, you have to be bold and you have to speak up and you have to be courageous about it. And then you can always talk to people afterward about how things need to change.
All right. Thank you, Christy. You're up next, Darcy. And just to refresh your memory, what's your strategy for handling situations where your voice is overlooked or dismissed in decision-making spaces? Go for it.
Sure. So I mean, that's evolved also over time with position, right? So, I had different strategies when I was sort of climbing into certain roles or certain leadership positions. It still happens now, and the strategies are different. So I think it's sort of important to think about the ways that our approach to this does have to evolve as our positions change. I'm not gonna lie, this happens all the time in government, right? Like, I think government is sort of uniquely oriented for this to happen to women, especially because that's a place that's really, and especially in the last like 20 years, built itself around people literally or metaphorically kind of shouting over each other for their chance to be seen and heard. So there's a lot of competition for your attention. And one of the best strategies I ever heard of and immediately implemented while I was sort of working my way into leadership roles and now try to build intentionally in the teams that I lead is what the female staffers in the Obama administration did. So they were noticing that individually they were getting talked over by men. They were getting sort of shut down, or men were taking credit for their ideas. So they banded together and came up with a plan that when one of them had a good idea, the other ones would repeat it and give her credit until all of the men were forced to acknowledge the woman whose idea it was. And they did that for each other, and they did it for years. And they fundamentally changed the culture of that White House to eventually, a lot of them would say, they didn't need to do it all the time. And so now in sort of my teams, I try and build environments where women's voices, if you stick them next to men, don't automatically disappear. I think that's really important and something female leaders can give. I saw this. It's a meme. Help me, but it's the best thing ever, and I'm getting it made into a poster for this office. And it just said, "Women did not work this hard for a seat at the table just to watch men eat." And absolutely, it's that 100% of the time. We explicitly need to not let men take credit for women's hard work and ideas. And that means not just our own, it means the woman sitting next to us. We need to give credit where it is due. And that's also not really easy in environments where credit is how you advance. And this happens, I think, in the corporate world too, where it is considered the property of whoever holds the title and not the person who did the work. That can be really challenging. So I had a boss who really went to bat for me on this issue. She, outranked me by a lot, and I did really good award-winning work. And she's, of course, who got the invites to go present the work. And she was the first boss in my entire career who, when she went to do that, would say, "This work was done by my staffer, Darcy. She did this. I'm really happy to present it." And she gave me credit in every room, every time for years. And there's no articulating what a huge impact that made on my ability to start to sort of show people what I could do and be trusted when I spoke up in meetings or have people listen when I came with an idea, because now it was backed up by all of the, research and data I was producing, but that in other environments, maybe somebody else was taking credit for. And so I think that's really, really important for women.
All right. Thank you so much. We're going to come right back to you, Darcy. So this is a question for 3 of the panelists. We'll go in this order: Darcy, LaShawn, Christy. All right. So Darcy, you first, then LaShawn, then Christy. What's a piece of advice that helped you find confidence in rooms where you were the only woman?
Okay. I'm going to do the opposite of what Laura told us to do. I'm always a little combative on this intern. I'm an Aries, right? This is my season. A little warrior vibes. Um, and the best advice somebody gave me, and I don't even remember who it was, but I've used it for 20 years, and more as I've gotten older. But like, when you are feeling like you don't belong someplace, try very hard to remember how many deeply mediocre men have been in charge of you prior to this moment where you are a little worried. Like, remember how much more money they made and how much faster they were promoted. And think about all of the compounding interest on that money they made while you were having all the good ideas that maybe some guy took credit for. I find anger very motivating. And just like gather all of that frustration, take up all the space you are now entitled to, and just say your piece, right? Just be who you are, be unapologetic about it, outshine whoever it is you're gonna outshine. And if they hate you for it, oh well, dig your heels in and just outlast them, right? Like, we have every right to be where we are. We have worked for it, we have earned it. We need to get out of our own way and just take up that space. Don't let anybody tell you you're not good enough to do that.
Thank
It
you,
was
Darcy.
it
And
was
now
probably
yeah, LaShawn. Thank you.
sorry. It was probably 30 years ago. I had been asked to make the first presentation at a conference, and I was so nervous. And I just remember that presentation still. I was pretty sure that my knees were just visibly shaking. I just felt like I was going to fall down at any moment. And I was talking to a friend of mine about it afterwards. I don't think I can do that again. I was so scared. And he said, LaShawn, were you prepared for that presentation? I said, of course. He said, we talked through some things and he said, you do realize you were the expert in the room at that moment, right? I said, no, I didn't really think of it that way. He said, regardless of what the audience knew, no one else was more studied on that particular topic for that delivery at that moment than you. You need to recognize when you're the expert in the room. And so I really took that to heart. And so, what I do now when I'm thinking about going in whatever room, it doesn't matter, because like probably my colleagues on the call, there are many times that I'm the only something in the room. And whether I'm the only Black person in the room, I'm the only woman in the room, I'm the only person with gray hair in the room, it doesn't really matter to me anymore. And I think I mentioned this earlier, I have worked on knowing me. I have worked on being certain that I have the confidence that I need to do the things that I say I will do. I have really worked on defining myself and not allowing other people to define me. So what I find is that it doesn't matter to me who's in the room. When I go in the room, I'm going in the room to do whatever it is that I'm supposed to be in the room for. I don't need the validation. It's good to hear, sometimes a compliment or something that affirms what I'm bringing, but I don't have to have it. And I think there is a unique empowerment and peacefulness and confidence that comes with that. When I don't have to wait for someone to affirm me, I bring that affirmation with me when I enter the room. So it just really doesn't matter who's in there. It can be more women, it can be men, I can be the only whatever. I'm going in because I'm supposed to be there. And because I'm supposed to be there, I bring with me what comes with me all the time. So it really doesn't matter to me. If I show up, I'm going to be me, and I'm going to feel confident with what I'm bringing into the space.
Thank you, LaShawn. Appreciate it. And Christy, we're to you. And just to remind you, what piece of advice helps you find confidence in rooms where you were the only woman? Go for it.
Sure. Well, there's been great advice so far. I agree with all of that. And I would say in my particular case, very early in my career, I held jobs and worked in environments where I had frequently been the only woman. And in many cases had been the first woman, as I am in my current job, who had ever worked in that company in those positions. And many of them were more labor-based positions. And so I will say that that experience built an enormous amount of confidence because I really had to hold my own literally in aircraft mechanics and refueling and in environments where in my era, women had never been and were not expected to understand or know or be successful, and with men who weren't used to that experience. So putting yourself in challenging positions, going ahead and going for that, and will build your confidence for sure. So I happen to have those experiences behind me. So I do think if that's not your experience, but you're having issues with, being able to have your voice heard, I would say there's a number of things you can do. Knowing your stuff, we kind of heard that from both Darcy and LaShawn. You are in that room for a reason, and you're in that position for a reason, and own it thoroughly and fully. Be prepared, and know your stuff, as was said before. The other thing is, if you just happen to be somebody who is less assertive or less able to be comfortable maybe in the way that you present, just train yourself. There's lots and lots and lots of opportunities to train yourself up and become a confident speaker, even if inside you're maybe lacking a little bit. And I think that was LaShawn's experience. Probably nobody else in that room noticed or felt the way that she felt about her presentation. So some of that's just training, repetition, experience.
All right. Thank you, Christy. Okay, Laura, I'm coming to you now. I've got a question for you about that elusive thing, work-life balance. How do you navigate the pressures of leadership while maintaining personal well-being?
Well, I really wanted to have this question because throughout my career, work-life balance, you hear that term a lot, and frankly, it's difficult. Leadership can be stressful. It's very busy. And most of us feel like we're not doing a great job at all the different roles we play, whether it's a leader or manager, mom, spouse, when you're being pulled in so many different directions. And I think that's normal to feel inadequate sometimes when you're trying to deal with so much. What I really tried to do throughout my career when I was, just feeling all over the place, I really tried to get organized. That's really kind of my first thing, made me feel better when I felt organized. I read a great book by David Allen of Getting Things Done. He has a very, very simple way of compartmentalizing things and making sure that you're on top of, because if you feel like you're on top of your game at work, and you have things organized, then the rest kind of comes together. At least for me, it was that way. Because you sometimes feel like you're dropping your kid off really quick, getting them out of the car, and you just get feeling a sense of calmness when I was more organized. Um, and I think too, in my career, I always wanted to say yes to everything. Your boss wants this, your boss wants that, you're there 12 hours a day or whatever. You got to learn to say no and feel okay about it. That's the thing, is like feeling okay. It's okay to say no. And the reason why, and I think when it took me a long time to learn that, to learn to take the importance of myself first versus the career. I mean, I always was very career oriented. So learning to say no in a productive way. And I think it just gives you more time to handle other things in life, that are very, very important. And lastly, I think that finding some way of, whether it's mental clarity through meditation. I didn't learn that till late, but boy, that is really helpful. And I have to exercise, and I get it out of the way. I schedule it. I do it first thing in the morning, even if it has to be 4:30 in the morning, to be able to be at a commute and then a 7:30 meeting. I just made sure it was a priority in my life, because I know I always felt better when I did something physical. Before the start of my day, or even at the end of the day, once you're all in knots and you find some way to do it, whether it's yoga or something more physical. Find ways to do it and schedule it and put it in your life, because if you don't schedule it, you're probably gonna just come home and say, I'm too tired, I got to cook dinner. You put yourself last sometimes. And I think it's important that you kind of think about putting yourself first so that you can be better for everything around you.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. And one of your comments made me think of a quote from Stephen Covey. This may not be verbatim, but something along the lines of that he got more comfortable saying no because he had a bigger yes burning inside. And I feel like your comment really captured that. I'm not just saying no for no's sake, but I'm saying no to that because I need to say yes, maybe to exercise or something else, a more important project to me. All right, thank you so much. All right, this question is for all four of you. So we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order. So we're going to go back to Laura first, then LaShawn, then Christy, then Darcy for this one. It's a two-parter. How has your leadership style changed over the years? And what advice would you give to your younger self if you could, if you had a time machine? So Laura, you're first. How has your leadership style changed over the years, and what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, it changed tremendously from many, many, many years ago. I think all of us know that you're kind of thrown into supervision or leadership over time. You're sometimes a type A personality. You do everything great. You're a hard charger. You get things done, and people see that in you, and so they go, okay, they'll make a great manager, supervisor, leader. And you just like are kind of thrown into it. I think in recent years, we now have more leadership training. We have more webinars like this on discussing leadership because leadership is at every level. Because I was type A, got things done, head down at work, I kind of expected that kind of to be everybody's MO, and boy, was I wrong. I had a rough start in my early years, and I probably turned a lot of people off because of that mentality and not thinking everybody needs to be different to make a great team. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses and things in their life, and you just need to be more understanding as a leader because everybody's life is different. Everybody has different things to offer. Everyone is diverse and have different thoughts, and that's what makes it chime. Like when I retired, I felt like I walked away and it was like a symphony of just the quality, the diversity, the everything about everything that made our team so successful. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned over the years is really like you have to be more accepting of different styles of work, different philosophies, different ideas, because that's going to make the team better. And the second part of the question was, what advice would I give your younger self? I think probably just really you have to build yourself up. You have to give, like, people aren't just going to give you that. You have to be the one saying, I can do this. I remember somebody gave me a word of advice, whether it's public speaking or going into a meeting of people you don't know. Do the superwoman stance, just tell yourself you can do this. And really, I did it all the time. And when I got up to speak in front of people, because it's the worst thing, I hate public speaking. And I would do it right before and that was probably one of the best words of advice somebody gave me is it's like, you need to build your own self-confidence and you need to focus on that and meditate it and learn it and be it. That's probably what I would tell my younger self earlier on.
Thank you, Laura. LaShawn, take it away.
I think that to go way back when I first started working in 1988, and a few years into that, I think I saw leadership more as the role, the title, the thing. And what I have come to realize about leadership and how I see it now is that leadership is really a way of being. It really is about being in a position of influence at whatever level, in whatever way. And it is about how we embody those things within ourselves and then how they show up in our conversations and our decisions and our actions and our jobs. And so I think that I have really elevated my thoughts about leadership and what it really means. And that also translates to me thinking that those of us who carry that title should understand that this is an important thing. It's not just to have the title for the sake of having the title and all of the perks that come with it. It comes with responsibility. One of the things that we talk about here in Plano quite a lot for our leaders is that we have to make sure that as leaders, we are not treating our responsibilities like options, which means that when it's uncomfortable, when it's not the thing that we feel like doing, like Laura was talking about, even the exercise, it's not something that we get to put on and take off at will. When we wear the title, it is the title. When we take the role, it is the role. And so I have really elevated my thoughts about leadership. I take it very seriously. And I understand that it's not just about the position that someone holds, the name badge that they're wearing. It's about how they act out in those roles and how they carry themselves and how they help others in doing so. When I think about what I would tell the younger LaShawn, I think I'll speak back to sort of what Laura alluded to a little bit ago. I would tell her that she's got to prioritize herself, that she can't just be everything to everybody and expect the rest to be okay when she gives herself crumbs. And I had to learn that. I had to learn that after I had given everything to the people at work and to my children and to my spouse, and there was just not much left. And then what do I do with that? And do I schedule things for myself? No, there was a time in my life when that felt a little selfish, not anymore. And so I would tell her to think about how does she fit into her schedule, into her calendar, and to make sure that she is prioritizing herself as much as she's prioritizing everyone else. So that she wouldn't have to learn that in her 40s. She could know a little bit about it in her 20s and 30s. And I think I could have saved her a little bit of challenge, but she knows it now, so we're good.
Thank you, LaShawn. Okay, very good. Christy, just to remind you, how has your leadership style changed over the years, and what advice would you give your younger self? Go for it.
Sure, thank you. So, as is probably common with a lot of people, when you're first leading people, sometimes you might be leading from below. So that's a very different style. Most of us probably had some of those opportunities, but those are great opportunities to really test run some of those ideas and see how effective you can be when you're actually not in charge. But when we're typically given the actual formal leadership role of managing people, and it was in my case, you're managing a handful of people. It's a smaller group. They tend to be closer to you in terms of their skill sets and their experience and talents. So it's a little bit more collaborative. It's a little bit more maybe friendly and sort of more equals than once you're over a very large organization and you have a whole chain of command of lots of people. So I think that's just a natural progression. And you may also be working in the same field, some portion of your organization versus as you move up, you may be over more and more and more areas where you don't have expertise and where you're over other people. So I think that's really what I've noticed is change. I've had to change my style as I'm over more people, as I'm over more departments where I may not be the technical expert. And you have to kind of increasingly step back and let other people do what you were doing at your last job or the job before that. And so it's really being mindful that you're making space for others to follow you as you're going up. And certainly even from the transition I've just made in the last couple of weeks from a COO to an executive director, it's a huge difference because I'm over top professionals in their field, experts who are directing large divisions and departments and need to give them lots of space to really do that. And that's very different from me actually running operations and doing things. So I'm still as of right now in the midst of changing my leadership style and how I'm working with my direct reports. In terms of advice to your younger self, I think, and it's kind of been touched on here, having that confidence that you can achieve. I'll be honest with you. Other people, when I was starting early in my career, and maybe in my first, small management jobs, other people would tell me, that I could be in the job I'm in today or other jobs that were much higher. I really didn't process that. I really didn't like, what? No, I don't think so. That doesn't really make sense. I don't think I could do that. And here I am. And so, and in each step, that's an education process. But I think, having that confidence that it's a process, you're not there now. You couldn't do that job today, but you can in the future if that's what you want to do, and you can work towards that. I think that's what I would tell my younger self.
All right. Thank you, Christy. And Darcy, you've got the final word on this.
Okay, I'm gonna answer the question in reverse then. So I'll start with young me. I didn't think I was gonna be here like this, and I'm still processing the surprise. Let's do that. I, also had a pretty rough start when I was younger, and I didn't have a career path. I had like a Super Mario Brothers video game where I'd run into a wall and the wall would be somebody standing there outraged that I had succeeded at something, telling me I had no business there. And rather than ignore them, I would go, oh, and try something else. And I'd get a whole new, I would leave the city. I would go get a whole new career path. I would get a whole new job. And what that gave me eventually was a really amazing breadth of experience and a lot of knowledge I can apply now. But I really let a lot of people get in my way and convince me that I didn't belong in places where I probably actually did. And a lot of that was, society and kind of at the time, right? Like I was a housing insecure, pink-haired, tattooed, queer person with sort of ambiguous gender identity at the time. And, at 40 with hair grown out in a closet full of skirts and suits, little less friction there, but same person. Same dedication to the work, same goals, same big visions for how I want to change the world. And people still get in my way. So it turns out it wasn't the hair. But what I've had to develop is some resilience about how quickly people want to interrupt you when you are on a path that either they're not in charge of or that they don't totally understand yet. The first sort of impulse in most of the people that I encountered in my career path was immediate resistance, a desire to shut it down, whatever was happening. And I really, really listened to that for so long that even well into my 30s, I started winning awards for work I was doing. And I would show up and I'd be like, I do not belong here. Who rigged this? What is this for? Like somebody felt sorry for me. What is this? It took a long time to just really sort of take ownership of what I'd done and what I still do. So I'd tell younger me to, be even more obnoxious about not listening to people in positions of authority who were telling me things. And then, the other part of that is that leadership style evolves and it develops. And so one of the ways that mine has developed is that, when I was younger and I would have these almost always male bosses who just wouldn't listen to me, were really dismissive, were sort of outraged that I thought I deserved to have, a creative input on something, right? Like, again, a lot of this was like news and magazines where there's a very serious hierarchy about who gets to talk when. And I did not have a good barometer for when it was my turn, because it was never my turn. So I would just take up some space. And I would just dream about the day that I would be so good at the thing and I would work my way up and someday I would have the title that they respected or whatever it would need. I'd have the freedom to just have ideas and make them real because eventually people would respect that I knew what I was talking about and just do what I was telling them. And man, was I wrong about how that works. That's not how that works at all. And so now, fast forward many years into the future, what I really have come to understand is that leadership is much more about bringing people together who are willing to take a chance on whatever that vision is, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And I do everything I can to make sure that they're smarter than me, that they know more than I do about the things that I don't understand, that there are people who can take an idea I've got and are willing to run it farther and maybe in more unusual directions than I initially came up with, and that's the goal. And sometimes I pick those people wrong. Sometimes I get the goal wrong, right? Like you also get really comfortable with failure and like embarrassing failure. It's usually public. Um, but you build a team that just can do anything because they're working together towards that common goal, right? So now the issue about really shaping and making sure that everybody has the same vision and the same goal in mind, and they all have sort of the same understanding, and that they're doing what they do best in service of that thing. It turns out leadership is basically a marketing job, where you are constantly talking people into a vision of what something could be, if everybody would just work for it. Is the opposite of being a boss. And yes, you have to do all the hard calls, and people let you down, and some of them like require a lot of work, and others kind of cling to you, right? Like they're drowning people and they want you to, right? All the people-y things are super difficult, and you have to make decisions, and there's money stuff you have to worry about. But the whole gig is really just about like holding all these pieces together to create the conditions for lots of people in a group to be great, and to be great at the same time in service of this sort of, end goal that you have to keep front and center for them. So if you do it right, people follow towards that light that you've sort of built for them all on their own. But whatever gets built, it gets built as a group. It's a big group project.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, our timing is just about perfect. So I'm feeling good about the timing. I said that we would, right around 11, we would try to transition to the Q&A from the folks who are in attendance. So that was the end of my official questions for the panelists. Thank you, panelists. And now I'm going to hand it over for about 18, 20 minutes to Karen Evans, and you've been monitoring the Q&A, Karen. So Karen will be posing the next set of questions to the panelists. Thanks.
Thank you,
Karen.
Allison. And we have a number of questions in the Q&A. One of them is for all of you. So the question is, for those of you who hold a master's degree, do you believe it has contributed to your ability to secure specific job opportunities? Yeah, Laura, go ahead.
Well, I waited and got my master's pretty late in my career, and I regret having done it so late in my career because aside from, I think it will offer job opportunities, it really gives you a lot of good skill information. I got a master's in organizational leadership. And like I said earlier on in one of my questions, that you're never really trained or given experience on supervision, leadership, those kind of facets, the soft skills. And when I took it probably COVID 2020, so it was 4 years before I retired. And I just felt like, gosh, I learned all this over my 35-year career, how to maneuver and deal with this. But boy, it would have been great to have this information 2 decades ago, to really kind of take it and work with it. So I truly believe, and as a leader, I'll look at that when I was looking at resumes and so forth to see what you invested in yourself to make yourself better. And not everybody has the opportunity to do that, so even if it's just courses in certain areas, or just any type of extra training that you do for yourself that shows that initiative, that was something I was always looking for in candidates.
Thank you, Laura. Christy?
Yeah, I would say in my case, it was imperative to my career trajectory. I would not have really secured that first job in consulting without it, most likely. And therefore not really have had this trajectory. However, the opposite of Laura, I went straight from undergraduate to graduate, primarily because the thought of actually going to a 9-to-5 Monday through Friday job terrified me. So that made it an awfully lot easier, to Laura's point. Not only is it more beneficial earlier in your career, it's a lot easier when you're still living on college expectations of income and not having kids yet, et cetera. So I would say that it's very beneficial, but you kind of have to think about where are you in your career? Are you making a shift? I'm mentoring a young woman right now who's in her early 30s, and she's making a career shift, and talking to her about what kind of graduate program can she do, even though it's a little later and she's got a child, and how do you put that program together that works for you? So I still think it has great value if you can make it work at whatever stage you're in.
Great. Thank you, Christy. Darcy?
So I will give the opposite perspective. I also sort of went straight from undergraduate, and I'm not going to say it didn't help, it did. But one of the things I think is also important to understand is that how power works for women is really different from how it works for men. And I think sometimes women, especially when we're younger and getting started, we confuse sort of what's happening, and we presume that what we need is additional expertise, that what we're looking for is more sort of awards, more diplomas, more things that brand us as experts so that people will take us seriously. And sometimes what's actually needed are more of those soft skills Laura's talking about, right? That you actually need more visibility, or you need a better network, or you need more connections. So I think it really has a lot to do with your industry and also sort of who your competition is, right? If you are in an industry where every other person has a master's degree, yeah, probably go get it. But if you're looking at it because you're stuck and you can't figure out why you can't get ahead, maybe try the chicken dinner circuit for a year and go make new friends. Maybe try joining some leadership groups or Toastmasters and work on your speech giving and get out there more, right? Like, you're not necessarily lacking in skills. What you might be lacking is a good enough network to move you forward, or knowing enough people, or the confidence to sort of put yourself out there as an expert so that people get to know you that way.
Great. Thank you, Darcy. Christy, there's a question specifically for you. Tamara says, I love the benefits you listed of working in the public sector. Would you say job security is generally higher as opposed to the private sector? You're muted, Christy.
Sorry about that. I just had to shut my door. There was a loud conversation going on outside. I think technically it is in general. It kind of depends on where you are in the public sector, but most public sector agencies are there's more protections in the workplace. Frequently, it's more unionized. And there is a greater sensitivity, because it is about public service, of whoever's running those agencies, of not just cutting staff to cut staff to make this quarter's, stock needs. And so now, of course, there can be wonderful private companies who are also very judicious about their employees and about providing security. But just, on average, in general, I'd say it's more secure, as long as you continue to perform.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a question for everyone. What advice would you offer to individuals facing challenges in working with difficult female colleagues?
I'll start
Darcy?
that one. I think this is there are levels of this and layers to this. So, right, like if it's just sort of a difficult office environment, one of the things I'm a big fan of is kind of surprising people with a behavior that's not actually socially expected of women, which is to call it out, just name it. This is happening. Why is this happening? I'd like to talk to you about this thing that is happening. I don't want to feel friction between us. Have I done something to offend you? What can I do to build a relationship? Right? It's all got to come from the goal of not having an argument, but building, a bridge to a better working relationship. But people don't expect women to do that. They expect them to sort of stuff it down and silently seethe, and then that usually actually makes the problem worse. But the other thing I think is a useful tool is, again, to remember that whatever's going on with other women, you're all facing some of the same challenges. You may be very different. You may have different challenges, but some of them are the same. Patriarchy doesn't work for either of you. So finding sort of ways that you can bond together to attack the problem that you're both facing, as opposed to the people and each other, is sometimes a really good way to kind of get over that hump of maybe initial friction. because I'm not, there is competition. And this
Mhm.
is actually it's one of the more frustrating sort of mentoring conversations I have when I give these conversations to like very young people who are just starting in sort of mid-career positions. I have a pretty solid rule that I pass on, which is for the first couple of years, no new friends. Like, and it's so hard because we are very social creatures, but no new friends till you understand what people want from you, how that's working, how the power dynamics move, what's going on here, right? You keep your old friends, you figure out the lay of the land, then you figure out if that person who's really, really nice to you likes you or wants something, right? That we have to learn to be a little more strategic when it comes to these things, that we cannot sort of approach really competitive, high stress environments as though that's not happening. That's not what fixes it. We can dismantle that from the inside, but we do have to be honest about the way that they work.
Thank you, Darcy. Laura, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just briefly, I think women, we could be catty sometimes. But I always thought in dealing with women that maybe didn't take to me, I would two things: kill them with kindness, and also make it a goal to try and win them over. And that's really kind of how I approach things, of just trying to see, let them know really a little bit more about me, and try and find, like Darcy said, some commonality about what they were seeking. I think one that came to mind was I beat somebody out on a election to a board or something like that. And I just felt like she was giving me the cold shoulder after it. And, just trying to kind of, gain her respect and just understand her perspective and her disappointment or whatever, and work with her. So trying to win people over was really, something that I really tried to do when I had situations like that.
Anyone else?
I think there's a benefit to knowing how to set boundaries, and there's real value to knowing how to use our voices. So it just sort of reinforces what Darcy and Laura have already said. But when we have those interactions, when any person, any group of people are behaving in ways that we feel are not helpful to us, in ways that are bothersome to us, I think that we have to make those decisions. Is it worth addressing this right now? And if so, what do I need to do about it? I don't think there is value in us just becoming victims of other people's behavior. We have to figure out, what is it that I have to do to make things better for me? And I think we can be a little selfish sometimes initially. Yes, we might want to make it better for everyone, but initially I'm trying to make myself feel a little bit better. And I think that we just have to figure out what is the strategy to get that done and be willing to activate the plan and follow through.
Great. Thank you, LaShawn. All right. I love this question. What is your one superpower or strength that has propelled you into your position of leadership? That's for anyone.
Mine is communication. Mine is, I think that communication is the thing in many areas. I feel like if we as human beings could get communication going a little bit better, a lot of these other issues that we have would take care of themselves. So communication and all that comes with it, the ability to listen empathetically, the ability to let people be who they are, the ability to accept reality for what it is. I don't spend a lot of energy trying to change reality. Reality is what it's going to be, but I can make sure that I'm addressing the things that I need to address, talking to the people that I need to talk to get things done. I think that my ability to communicate effectively and my willingness to accept people as human beings, regardless of what comes with them, has made all the difference in my career, in my life, in the peace that I feel all the time, in the empowerment that I have. I think communication is my superpower, and I'm going to continue to use it as such.
Thank you, LaShawn. Laura?
I just have to echo what LaShawn said. Communication and addressing issues head on. I mean, I think that sometimes we shy away from it, but you can do it. And I know Darcy has the angry approach, but I just feel like there's a way that you can always approach any issue you can't be mad about it. Yeah, those are times that happen, and you could be angry about it. But I think there's a way that you can just approach it and deal with it. And I think people appreciate that so much, that you're just not sweeping it under the carpet. And I think that has really led a lot. The other thing is, with communication, managed by wandering around, people want to see you as a leader. They want to talk to you. They want to know that you're approachable, that you're willing to kind of take a moment for that. Oh, I don't know how many times people would come up to me. I know you're really busy, but you know what? I'm never too busy to, help somebody move things along. Let's just keep the cog rolling. Everybody has a different role, and leaders need to take the time to listen and, communicate with staff. And so I think everyone's going to probably say the same thing.
Thanks, Laura. Christy?
Yeah, so I think for me, and listening to the people who've promoted me and hired me, it's really about delivering results and transformative change while maintaining or increasing morale. So that's been something I've been able to do over and over again in this organization. And we talked a little bit earlier about in the public sector, there's a lot of opportunity for transformative change. And I think, it's still absolutely requires what the prior panelists spoke to, which is really being personable, approachable, people knowing that, especially when you're going through changes, that you have their back, that this is going to be better for everybody, that we have a pathway forward, and that they understand why you're doing it. So that communication piece is, of course, always there.
Great. And Darcy?
For me, it's a willingness to ask for forgiveness and not permission. Almost everything I've done that got me noticed or led to a promotion or that really helped me in my career, I did with nobody asking me to do it. I just did it. And oftentimes it's something I did and had to convince people was worth me finishing. So, for example, that blueprint on pandemic recovery was meant to go to a group of white male economists somewhere else. And I turned it into a partnership with me because I have an interest. I like data. I care about economics and women in the economy. And I went to one meeting and they were, wealthy PhDs, and they were all white men, and they had no idea about some of the data they were looking at the way that I did, because I had been desperately poor. And I was like, I know what that means. You guys don't understand what that data means. I do. Let me help you. And then I got to redesign the study, and then I got to write the report. But absolutely nobody told me to go to the meeting. I just went to the meeting. So things like that, being willing to put yourself out there a little bit and then own the results of that, because it could have gone wrong. It just didn't. And I worked really hard to make sure that it didn't. It was the first year of COVID. All I did was, I basically wrote my first book. All I did was this report. And I was working from home, so I had the ability to do that, right? But that was, I think it's really that, the willingness to put yourself out there and to just be brave and see how something goes.
Karen, can I just say really quickly that I
Sure.
hope that it's very obvious to the audience, probably already know it, but there is not one way to be successful. There is not one way to be an amazing leader. There is not one way for us to find the path to where we're trying to go. And I think it's really nice to be able to hear the different approaches among all of us today. And I think that sometimes we're looking for that one way, that one book, that one thing. There's not one way. We have to do the inner work, find our path, and make it work.
Yep. I think you hit on something, LaShawn, being true to yourself, right? And knowing yourself. I think we're hearing that from everybody. Just different ways and different paths. It's really inspiring. We have one more question. Well, it's actually a kind of a statement question. There's a book, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office by Lois Frankel. Describe a behavior, this is for everyone, describe a behavior that could undermine a woman's advancement.
I think our own lack of confidence can stand in the way of our advancement. I'm concerned that sometimes what we are applying as an external factor for why we're not getting what we want might actually be an internal factor that we've not yet accepted. So my short answer would be, if we are not completely aware of who we are and how we exist within the context of this environment, then that can play against us. But on the other hand, as we've all said, when we know ourselves, when we know our skills, when we know how to navigate, it pays great dividends.
Thank you, LaShawn. Anyone else? Laura? You're muted, Laura.
Sorry about that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would echo what LaShawn's saying is that, um, I think we are our own worst enemy sometimes of like not putting ourselves out there, making that big leap of speaking up in a meeting or, doing what we need to do to kind of help ourselves advance. If you, again, you're your own advocate, you're the one who's going to make yourself progress. We have a lot of people that help us and support us, but really it's up to me to make sure that I continue down the path that I'm looking for, and I have to make those efforts and be courageous to do things that are that make me uncomfortable a lot of the time.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Christy or Darcy? Yeah, I see your hand up, Darcy.
I famously struggle with like self-help leadership development books marketed towards women. And I specifically hate that they're in the self-help section. They should be under leadership development. Can we just say that? And part of that is because there's this, I think while presenting solutions, they also underline this idea that there's stuff that you are doing wrong and that it is individually your problem to fix. We aren't even in the Constitution. Okay, women have had a reasonable expectation of relatively equal rights to men for one generation. That's it, 60 some odd years, maybe 55, depending on when we're starting from. So the idea that whatever's getting in your way is something that you can fix with a book or a bubble bath or a better exercise schedule or more meditative practices or a master's degree is sort of feeding the actual problem, which is that none of these systems were built for any of us to be in ever in the first place. They weren't built for us to lead. They were built with an expectation that we'd be at home cooking dinner for the guys who ran them. And so there is so much of this that is a collaborative project that we have got to work on together that is about dismantling systems that were not built for us to succeed in. You're not doing anything wrong. And if something's in your way, it's because it was designed to get in your way. It's like the same reason I hate the whole concept of imposter syndrome. You're not an imposter. These systems weren't built for you to be in, and somebody's telling you that, or people are actively reminding you that, we weren't wanted. We are wanted now and more all the time, and growth is an evolution and we are making progress, but progress is not equality and we just aren't there yet. So, I think it's give yourself a break, I guess, is what I would say. Cut yourself some slack and remember that like some of what this takes is us completely rebuilding society to be more equitable for all of us. It wasn't built with us in mind.
Thank you, Darcy.
Yeah, I would agree. And I don't think there is one behavior. One behavior may be perfect in one organization and business and not in another. So it really is about where you are and understanding that. And there's places I've worked where I would have probably never progressed no matter what, because it wasn't built for me to progress very specifically. I actually worked in a company at one point where women were not allowed to wear pants, for example. So, so part of, and honestly, I think if I've been myself here. I never tried to manipulate myself for getting any particular role here. And this organization, I was able to be successful in this organization with that. So it wasn't about me. It's about where you are and about figuring out how to break through those barriers if that's what you're facing in your organization.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you all. Just wonderful, wonderful ideas, insights, wisdom from your experience. We're bumping up against almost 11:30, so I'm going to hand it back over to Allison to wrap up for us.
All right. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone who attended and for posing your questions. And thank you, panelists, for all your speaking off the cuff there for the last 25 minutes or so. So, parting words. I hope you've been inspired by today's panel of women leaders. As you reflect on our discussion, I challenge you to take one action in the next 2 weeks to support and uplift women in leadership. That could mean offering to mentor a colleague, amplifying a woman's voice in a meeting, advocating for inclusive policies, or even reaching out to one or more of the leaders here who inspired you today, maybe on LinkedIn. Small actions add up to big change. Let's keep the momentum going beyond this virtual space. Thank you for being a part of this conversation and for your commitment to building a more inclusive and supportive future for everyone. Thank you.
Can we, oh, she's gone. I was going to ask if we could take a screenshot, but we lost LaShawn.
Oh, no.
It's all
I
right.
gotta run to a meeting. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
all of
Thank
for
you.